you need to first decide, is this going to be a non-negotiable for me? Because if it is, you might want to bring it up before you even get engaged. If you're, particularly if you're the man and you're the one that's going to, extend the proposal of marriage. If it's required for you to marry that person sign a prenup, you might want to go ahead and have the discussion before you even propose.
Yes.
Okay.
The storyline for a second marriage is to me a lot easier. It's like I've come out of this poor marriage, and this is what I'm concerned about. And if we want to take this step further, I need some assurances, and this document has it. I think it's harder for the first marriage.
Right. Absolutely.
But that's a good point, Leslie, that, do that before you even get engaged.
Right.
And you're talking about these important life topics.
Correct.
Welcome to a Wiser Retirement Podcast, where we believe the best financial advice should always be conflict-free. I'm your host, Casey Smith. Guiding you to financial freedom today are my two co-hosts, Missie Beach and Leslie O'Neill. Hello.
Good morning.
Leslie, this is your second appearance on a Wiser Retirement.
Seasoned veteran.
A seasoned veteran. I don't know. I want to say divorce attorney or partner.
Family law sounds fluffier. Yeah.
Family law.
Euphemism. Come on.
I know, right? Partner at Odell and O'Neill in Marietta, just up the street from Wiser Global Headquarters. You've worked with several of our clients, and you've done a great job. So that's why we keep inviting you back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoy being here.
All right. So let's talk about prenup. Bum, bum, bum.
Dun, dun, dun.
I know. I feel like
topic.
This has come up quite a bit in some of our client meetings recently.
Which is good.
Which I feel like has never been talked about before.
Yeah.
Actually, in two ways. One that's already been signed, and then in another case, one that's being, should I be doing this? That's actually a friend of mine who's might get remarried. I mentioned that to him too.
That he should.
He should.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They're both successful, but
it's not a bad thing.
Draw a line in the sand.
Establishes some clarity.
So different than a business partnership. If I made the worst decision ever to merge with this company, how do I
exit stage left easily?
Yes, how do I get back? How do I reset where there's no harm?
So Leslie, do you think that more people go into a second marriage with a prenup versus a first marriage with a prenup?
Absolutely. For obvious reasons. When you're going into a second marriage, it means your first marriage generally means your first marriage failed for whatever reason, unless somebody, died or something like that. So generally it's just a scenario where you've already been through a divorce once. You kind of know what to expect in terms of not everything is going to be agreed upon. It's not going to be easy. It could be expensive. So I do think, I would say more often than not, second marriages, the prenup, whether they actually execute it or not is another story, but it's a conversation topic for sure.
I would add a question there, age.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, because the first one in your 20s, you got nothing.
Right. You have nothing. You don't have
but
assets.
Maybe in your
you don't have kids
mid-30s, if you've been career focused, that maybe it comes up more.
Absolutely.
With age. So maybe it's not a second marriage thing. It's more of an age
and
thing.
Maturity too. Yeah. Just being willing to have harder discussions when you're older because, you're just more seasoned and you're right. You have more assets to protect at that point.
Right. And even if you are married, I'll throw this in here. Even if you are married and you have that inheritance much later.
Yes.
Just don't put those assets into joint.
Correct.
Exactly.
That's a big one. Keep those inherited dollars in separate accounts without the other person's
own built-in prenup with having to sign nothing.
Exactly. There's a lot of things you can do that don't even require a prenup to protect your assets.
And I feel like that's a conversation that we have with a lot of clients is, when they're talking about how they want to leave their assets to their kids that are adults and they're like, oh yeah, we'll just leave it outright. Well, maybe you don't want to leave it outright to kids. Maybe you want to leave it in a testamentary trust. So you can still control those purse strings from the grave and, keep it separate and not allow it to go out into your kid's individual name and then a joint account and somehow, sure, everything's great until it's not.
Exactly.
That's what reminds me of my my good friend, Gary Kitchen. He passed away in 2020, Miss Gary. But we were out at the Marietta Country Club, and I made this putt. It looks like it was going to go in the hole from a long ways away, and just rolled up to the edge and stopped.
Crushing.
Did it kill Gary?
No.
Oh.
No. He said, that's the son-in-law putt. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, it came up shorter than your expectations. So that's why you would do that.
Exactly.
We were talking about leaving in a trust as opposed to just outright gifts.
Those daughter and sons-in-law can't get their grubby hands on your money.
Right.
Yes, because you don't want to be those in-laws who are trying to change the layout of things once your kids are already married.
Right.
Because you don't want to
seem controlling while you're being controlling.
Exactly, Leslie. Because I've seen that in real life.
It's really all about the optics.
Optics are everything. Exactly. And that creates very painful situations for all those involved when they're trying to do that after the fact.
So when we start with the basics for people who are just trying to figure this out.
Okay.
So what is a prenup?
Okay, well, a prenup in its simplest terms is a contract that two people that intend to get married enter into in order to address how they, in the unlikely or an unfortunate event of a divorce, address how their assets and property interests are going to be divided, address how their debts will be divided, address spousal support, business interests, inheritance rights, those sorts of things. So it's at its simplest, at its core, it's a contract.
So what's included inside that contract typically? So
generally, what I just described, I mean, property rights, most people just want to protect their money. I mean, that's what the goal is, whether their money is invested in real estate, invested in businesses, invested in financial accounts. That's usually the goal going in is I want to make sure my money is protected. And that in the event of a divorce, we kind of already have a fair outlook on how all of those assets are going to be divided, if at all. So that's generally what's covered. Spousal support as well is covered often. We get questions about custody and visitation and child support. And I think most people by now know, but not everyone, that those things cannot be included in a prenup. For a couple of reasons. Number one, they impact the rights of third parties, which are the children involved. So those rights have to be reviewed and approved by a judge, whether there's a prenup or not. Judges review and approve, review or reject agreements that address children's rights and child support. So that cannot be included. And the other reason is that those determinations have to be made at the time that the divorce is occurring. So you can't decide now what's in your child's best interest 20 years from now for a child that doesn't even exist yet, so it's too speculative anyway. So those things can't be covered, but pretty much anything else is fair game in terms of trying to cover what's going to happen in the event of a divorce with all of those assets and debts and support needs. So some of this gets sensationalized by celebrity Hollywood, yes. But for everyday people, is it common to have the exit strategy in there? Because a lot of times you hear or you find out after the fact that movie star X got divorced and he or she married someone that wasn't as famous, and they get $1 million a year for the rest of their life if this marriage is if they
dissolved.
Lasted more than 10 years or something.
Exactly.
What a goal.
I know. Gotta just make it to that 10-year mark and then you're set.
I don't know. I've seen some of these 80-year-olds with 35-year-old girlfriends. You kind of wonder if there's not an agreement in there somewhere.
I know. Hopefully. I haven't seen a lot of those. I guess we just have like regular folks here in Georgia. Nothing too. I've heard about the sensational prenups with, just outrageous things. Like as long you've got to maintain a certain weight in order to get alimony. I mean, like it's crazy stuff. I wish I had seen one of those. It'd be juicy,
right.
But no, I mean, most of the time people have really good intentions. And the goal is just to do fair things and to make sure that the fair intentions going into the marriage are carried out in the event of a divorce. So I haven't seen a lot of the crazy stuff. I've heard about it, though.
Okay. So how do you even start the conversation with someone about this?
Very,
how does that
delicately.
go? They just bring them down to your office and say, she wants to tell you something?
Talk
talk to Leslie.
It's a very awkward topic, to be honest. I mean, it is quite awkward. Usually one person comes to meet with me privately, and the other side sort of has an idea that the prenup is. Usually they've said, yeah, I've already talked to so and so about it, and they know it's coming. They don't know what it necessarily is going to say, but they know it's coming. So they usually have already had that discussion. I have not yet also had this situation where someone asks for a prenup and the other person just sort of hysterically refuses. So,
really?
Yeah,
that's good.
Maybe those just don't make it to your desk.
They just don't. They don't make it to the altar. I guess.
Oh yeah, maybe that.
They're not getting
It
married.
dissolves exactly. But I believe it or not, people are pretty adult-like about it so far that I've seen. I've been surprised by that, to be honest with you, because it can be a mutually beneficial document. It doesn't have to be drastically one-sided. It's an awkward document because it's preparing for something that you're going into a marriage saying, I'm going to love and honor and cherish you for the rest of our lives. Oh, but sign this prenup here just in case that turns out to not be true. But at the end of the day, it's a life planning type of document. It's like insurance, and so if you approach it that way and are a little more business-like about it, it can be a very valuable tool in the planning of your life.
Yeah.
Well, you sign a will, and it's not like you want to die.
Correct. It's a very good way to way to put it.
But everyone will die.
True. Yeah, whereas the goal is to not get divorced.
Right.
Yeah.
But you sign a healthcare directive. You hope you're never going to be incapacitated. Okay,
true.
How about that one?
That's better.
Very good point. That's better. I think that the bringing up of the topic, obviously, I think you need to first decide, is this going to be a non-negotiable for me? Because if it is, you might want to bring it up before you even get engaged. Particularly if you're the man and you're the one that's going to extend the proposal of marriage. If it's required for you to marry that person sign a prenup, you might want to go ahead and have the discussion before you even propose.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the storyline for a second marriage is to me a lot easier. It's like I've come out of this poor marriage, and this is what I'm concerned about. And if we want to take this step further, I need some assurances, and this document has it. I think it's harder for the first marriage.
Right. Absolutely.
But that's a good point, Leslie, that, do that before you even get engaged. Right. And you're talking about these important life topics.
Correct. And that way you're not in some awkward scenario where she's got a ring on her finger that you just spent a whole bunch of money on. And we've got a wedding date and contracts with vendors that have been signed. And then you're and then you're kind of saying, oh, well, this is sort of mandatory for me. I'm not going to go forward with the wedding. And that's when you get into these sort of duress situations where she feels forced and, but
she's already, he or she, she in my example, I guess, has already told everyone how excited she's about the marriage.
And then
and then here comes the drama.
If it's ever being challenged down the road, well, I felt like I had to sign it because I had already announced to everyone we were getting married, and that would be humiliating. So I didn't really feel like I had a choice. So I just really think right out of the gate, before you even explore engagement, I would go ahead and just feel the other person out and make sure that would be something they are open to. And if they say, no, I'm not open to that, then you need to evaluate whether you want to get engaged in the first place and just, nobody has to get married.
Yeah. Talk to your young adult kids.
Exactly.
Anything goes.
And then another way to bring it up, particularly on a second marriage scenario, is if you have children, you can kind of blame it on them and just say, you know what, I've got children I have to think about. This is what, their money one day too in my mind. And so I want to make sure that everything is just really clear for everyone's sake.
That's smart.
Not unfair, just clear and predictable for all of us.
How do you think that you focus the document on fairness?
It depends. I mean, it's really a case-by-case basis. I think if you've got a situation where one side, and we hear about these scenarios, usually if it's a really mutually beneficial throughout the marriage, nobody's going to seek to set it aside. It's just going to govern the divorce, and we're all going to follow it, and that's going to be that. It's the scenarios where there's this gross disparity in incomes or gross disparity in assets. And so I think you just address that. If you're a very wealthy person and you're marrying someone who's not that wealthy, and you're going to be married for a long period of time, maybe, and you're going to be clear that anything in my name is going to stay mine, even if it was earned during the marriage, then maybe you do put a little bit of spousal support in there. And if certain terms are met or the length of the marriage extends a certain amount of time, just so that person isn't left high and dry if you're going to be keeping all of this money, and so, like I said, it's a case by case scenario and it depends on the financial circumstances of the parties, But
as an attorney, though, so I can only relate it to like business law, right? So if you're negotiating, you put everything you want into an agreement. You pass it to the other side.
Right.
And if they're willing to sign it, then they signed it.
Yeah.
If you pass the other side and they go like, hey, these are 5 things that you're trying to screw me.
Yeah.
Then you're like, well, we can negotiate that. And you negotiate things off, getting back to where it is that you really wanted to be. To me, that seems very dangerous to do a prenup that way, where you just put everything in and you pass it across the table.
It is. I mean, you're having an arm's length negotiation with someone
you can only represent one person.
Yes, correct. And actually, it's wiser to have 2 lawyers representing the 2 parties. See how I did that? So it's wise to have 2 lawyers involved that are negotiating and advising their clients. But it is an awkward negotiation because these 2 people are meanwhile, they're like, oh, we just came back from the wedding website. I mean, the wedding venue and, the tasting for and now we're going to negotiate alimony.
And you're like, taste this.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be quite awkward, but yeah, I mean, you can hardball negotiate, but you also have to recognize the delicacy of the situation is that you're negotiating for folks so I'm usually very, I stay in constant communication with my client. Now, is this going to offend them? Are do we want to just be clear? We just aren't trying to start high and you start low and have some formal negotiation
strategy.
Yeah. We're just trying to be fair and honest and upfront and transparent. And so, I think having 2 lawyers that are also have that understation too. We're not here we're not here for blood. We just want to get a nice, fair agreement.
If you're the party being asked to sign a prenup, I would say it's probably good to pay for a couple hours of someone's time to review the document Absolutely. To make sure there's not any gotchas in there.
Absolutely. And in fact, if the, higher income earner or the wealthier of the 2 comes to see us, we will advise them. The other person, usually a she, but not always, needs to have his or her own independent lawyer look over it, even if you have to pay for it, and pay the fee. That lawyer will represent your future spouse. And then the lawyers will do an affidavit. If it's going to be a really solid prenup, the lawyers will do an affidavit that I independently, met with so-and-so and reviewed this document with them. And so that there's, so that both parties were clearly represented by counsel. So that's an important step.
I think what I've seen has been parents with grown children that have an estate strategy, which is a lot of gifting. You're talking about $200,000 a year for many years. They're the ones that say you need to get a prenup.
Yes.
So it's not so much. In your world, you see statistically, right? The man has X amount of assets. He's remarrying someone who doesn't have that. But I think in our world, we're seeing a little bit different, where it's grandparents that are
insisting. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're like, we're near the exclusion, and we have 2026 coming where all my exclusion gets cut in half. And so I have to start gifting millions of dollars over these time period. And they're worried about, well, they seem happy, but what if they're not happy?
Right. And ultimately the child can keep that inheritance in a separate account, but you can't always trust your kids to do this.
Exactly.
Just forget or brain fog.
Or just want to go buy this lake house is on the market. And they obviously they're going to jointly title it.
Exactly.
Use their inheritance to purchase it. So that's a real concern. And so prenup would certainly help address inheritance that was used for joint marital things.
Right. But you have to have kids that cooperate and actually get the document done. But yeah, that's interesting.
Are you curious why annuities keep coming up as a potential investment option? People are often told that annuities can effectively mitigate investment risks and help secure their financial future. However, annuities often benefit the salesperson and might not be the best choice for you as a consumer. To learn more about the various types of annuities, the negatives of owning them, and better investment alternatives, we have a free ebook on our website just for you. To download our ebook, Buyer Beware, Why Do They Keep Trying to Sell You That Annuity? Simply click the link in the episode notes or visit wiserinvestor.com/guides. Now let's get back to the episode.
So yeah, I mean, once we get through that, so we've got the document signed. Do we file this in the court anywhere, or is it just kind of live? You can. I mean, it'll generally be reviewed and evaluated and enforced if the court enforces it, regardless of whether it was filed. But it does not hurt to file it. It's probably a best practice to file it in the county where the marriage is going to take place or where the couple is going to reside. Yeah.
So, I mean, generally that's the best approach. I have had a situation where it was a couple. The gentleman had a lot of money and signed a prenup with his soon-to-be wife. They got married. He just stuck it in a filing cabinet, and it turns out it went missing when it was time to get divorced 20 years later.
Darn.
And she I don't have it. I don't know what
I lost my
signed
copy.
It, but I don't know where. I don't have my copy.
Wow.
And so, and his lawyer had long since passed away, the lawyer that had drawn up the prenup. So, I mean, it actually was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court because he was not going to stand for it. I mean, he was very, very upset about the fact that she had clearly signed the prenup and she knew what it said. And she was admitting that there was a prenup, but she couldn't quite remember what it said. And, so that's step one. Keep your prenup. Keep a copy of it.
Right.
Make sure you have it. Make sure, keep a digital copy. All of that, so that it doesn't mysteriously go missing.
So, okay, so we created a prenup. When or why, or maybe both, I guess, would you change it?
Circumstances change. Things change. Somebody goes and has an affair, and comes crawling. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Oh, okay. Well, then let's sign. At that point, it would be a postnup.
Yeah.
But you can do a postnup, and I've seen that happen. We've had a case where there was a prenup. They got married. Husband had an affair. Wife was pregnant when she found out that he had an affair, and so he begged, and there were some terms and conditions for her to take him back. And it was, we're going to do a postnup, and we're going to change some things.
Because they had a prenup already?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, circumstances change, and that would be the reason to revise the postnup. But usually there's got to be some incentive. That's why I mentioned that scenario. The incentive to sign a prenup is, okay, we're not getting married if this doesn't get signed.
Right.
So I want to get married, so I need to go ahead and get this prenup signed, or else the wedding's not going to happen. So there's a little bit of incentive and a deadline, so to speak, that keeps things moving. The postnup, generally I see those scenarios where I'm either getting divorced or you're signing this postnup.
Okay.
That sort of incentive. Yeah. People generally don't just bring up postnups and revising prenups out of nowhere. There's usually some incentivized event that forces the issue a little bit.
Yeah, postnup makes sense because the assets are going to be a lot different at that point versus at the beginning. Yeah. And then what is the process of doing that?
It's going to be the same as a prenup.
It doesn't get approved by anybody. It's just what two parties agreed to.
Correct. I mean, anytime you're doing a prenup or a postnup, I highly recommend having a lawyer draft it. Don't get the the LegalZoom documents.
Yeah.
And I believe it or not, I've seen that. I had a client consult with me, and they did a prenup on LegalZoom, and it wasn't a poorly drafted document. It just didn't have two witnesses, which is a very simple requirement of a prenup in Georgia, for instance.
How do they not know that stuff?
Right? You would think. I mean, I guess it was LegalZoom for the entire country. And there's a lot of states that follow a Uniform Prenuptial Agreement Act.
Yeah.
Georgia does not follow that act. So we are on our own, so to speak, in terms of how we handle prenups. We do require two witnesses, one of whom has to be a notary. So it has to be a notarized signature with an extra witness for both parties. So that was an example where they just did the LegalZoom document. It didn't have a basic fundamental requirement. So it was, I mean, you can't even argue to enforce it because it's so unenforceable.
Right.
So
Just use an attorney.
yeah. So step one, use an attorney. And then the other standard rules apply to both a prenup and a postnup. You need to list out all of your assets. So there needs to be a full and fair disclosure of assets. So generally I have people prepare an asset list. They usually aren't detailed enough, and I make them add more detail. Let's do last 4 digits of bank accounts. Let's use most recent value, the date that we are valuing each account, so forth. So it's very, very clear what the assets are. That's a requirement for a prenup. And then there obviously has to be no fraud, duress, or mistake. So in the document itself. And those are the times you hear about, oh, we had to sign this prenup the day before the wedding, or, something like that. And that's the scenario I mentioned earlier. Maybe talk about it before you even get engaged, because otherwise you're going to be in that scenario where you're at the rehearsal dinner signing a prenup. So, and those are the ones that get challenged. I mean, quite often, you really need to have a reasonable amount of time before the wedding that the document is signed to avoid a claim that there was duress involved in the signing of the document. I would say all those same general rules apply with postnups. Obviously, there's no follow-up wedding unless you're getting your vows renewed or something. But other than that, it needs to be very clear, unambiguous, outline everyone's financial interests so everyone knows what they're signing.
But getting vows renewed, is that a legal thing?
I don't think so.
It's like a ceremonial thing, right?
Right, okay. Correct. There's no legality to a vow renewal. Yeah. You're right.
Right. Okay.
It doesn't change anyone's rights.
Yeah.
Once you're married, you're married.
Okay. So we're kind of on that path there for a second. So what are some common mistakes to avoid when doing this?
So some things
I keep seeing a theme here. Unequal bargaining power.
Right.
But isn't that the whole point of a prenup?
Well, bargaining power and just positions are two different things. I think if you've got two lawyers, you've got equal bargaining power. Yes. You've got two lawyers that are representing your interests. So it's not an uneven playing field, so to speak. Everyone is well represented. That's why I suggest if you're the financially inferior person, pay for the other person to have a lawyer that you're not in communication with. Make sure that lawyer knows they represent your future spouse, and that person has a quality, legal counsel to advise them. So that's even bargaining power, so to speak. But, prenups are often, they're not going to leave people in the same exact situation. They're not going to, leave people with the same amount of money departing a divorce. And that's not really the goal. And although unconscionability is a reason to set aside a prenup, something that is so grossly unfair that the court just cannot in good conscience enforce it, that very, very rarely happens. I mean, it's expected that it's not going to necessarily allow one spouse leaving the marriage to just be set financially. That's not the point of a prenup, to your point.
Is it an issue if the higher earning spouse is paying for the lower earning spouse's attorney and selects that attorney for her?
No, because any good attorney will have a contract with the client directly. I have people that have family members and so forth pay for my services, but that person is not my client. Mm-hmm. The person that paid for the services is not my client. My client is the person that signs the contract. So most attorneys are pretty good about maintaining that separation. And so I guess back to the point of optics, maybe it's not perfect optics, but I don't see a problem with it. If you say, look, I made sure she had a lawyer. She didn't have the funds to pay for a lawyer, so I paid for her lawyer. I didn't have any contact with that person. Mm-hmm. That person contracted with her as the client. I made sure their bills were paid. That's it. And she still, even though I put her in touch with this person, she still had to select the person and sign the contract.
Right, yeah,
with that
it's up
person.
to her to
Correct.
vet that attorney,
Correct.
and she put her signature on the contract.
Yes.
So that could not be.
I don't think that would be.
I
wouldn't be surprised if somebody made that argument as a Hail Mary. I've seen crazier Hail Mary arguments made, but I don't think that would be a successful way to set aside
secure.
a document. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So when it comes to state laws, obviously you probably shouldn't be consulting your girlfriend or guy friend
or the internet
right? About how to deal with this. So what makes, you mentioned the signature earlier, but what would make Georgia unique for a prenup? And does it matter if you got married in Alabama and you moved to Georgia?
So that's interesting. I mean, those are always sticky scenarios because I have one right now where they were married in Switzerland, and husband is a Swiss resident and a lawyer. Wife is,
but they're independent.
Meaning
Switzerland, is that like an independent?
Oh, yes. Neutral. Yeah, just
yes.
Now we got
that was a joke.
That was a joke.
I see.
Sorry, a little dry humor over here.
So anyway, I have one, and they signed a prenup in Switzerland, and it is written out in French, and it is apparently, according to the document, governed by Swiss law, but they live in Georgia and they're getting divorced in Georgia. So we're seeking to set it aside because my client doesn't even speak French, so she couldn't obviously even read the document. But I mean, we're getting a French lawyer to consult with us, a Swiss lawyer to consult with us about whether this document under Swiss law would even be valid, even if she could have read it. So it does create some complexities.
You think he created this himself?
I do.
Oh, because he's an attorney.
He's an attorney in Switzerland.
I think that's the worst thing,
right? Yeah,
that attorneys can do
is draft your own stuff. Yeah, that's unwise. So I mean, you generally, if you're asking, if the document says, okay, we're getting married in Wisconsin and this is governed by Wisconsin law, and then they move to Georgia, and then you're getting divorced in Georgia, it does create some challenges with asking a Georgia judge to enforce Wisconsin law. And so you have to, find some workarounds. Usually everyone can kind of generally agree, okay, this is what the requirements are in Wisconsin. This is what the law is in Wisconsin. I'm using that as a hypothetical state. And a lot of times it's comparable. It's concepts that we all can follow and understand. But you also can't predict where you're going to end up getting divorced. Although I do have a current client, believe it or not, that they're getting married in a different state. They plan on living in a different state for the first few years of the marriage, but both of their families are in Georgia. So they know they're going to end up in Georgia when they have a family and whatnot. So they're going to go ahead and have a Georgia lawyer draw up the prenup, even though they don't live here.
But would a Georgia judge throw out a Wisconsin prenup because it wasn't done in Georgia, the Georgia way?
No. If the document itself says it's governed by Wisconsin law, and Wisconsin doesn't require two witnesses, they only require one witness, and it only has one witness. The Georgia judge is likely to apply the Wisconsin law because that's what the contract says, and that's what the contract requires.
So to get out of that would be difficult. So just get two witnesses and a notary for everything.
Everything.
Just get an attorney.
We get three witnesses.
Yeah.
Just extra.
Belt
standby witness.
Belt and suspenders. Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So what happens when children are born after you've had a prenup?
Nothing really. The document, like I said, it's not going to say anything about the children, or it can't. So if it does, it's invalid. So nothing really changes with respect to the prenup when children come along.
So you have a prenup is protecting certain assets, but you're still going to go through the court system on how to pay child support.
Absolutely.
And alimony can still be a thing.
Yes. Prenups don't absolve you of the legal system, really. Sometimes they can make it harder, believe it or not. I have my case where with the Swiss prenup where now they're fighting over whether this is going to even be enforced, and we're hiring Swiss lawyers to consult with us. So, I'm
sure that's really cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And super simple because they speak perfect English. But
can you pay them in Bitcoin so you get away from the conversion?
Easy. That would be easy. So, it doesn't always solve every problem and avoid every pitfall. It can often create more problems. So I have advised people sometimes, I don't know that you necessarily need a prenup because it creates scenarios where you're having a whole separate fight at the beginning of the case about whether we're even going to enforce the prenup, and someone wants to set it aside. And then the entire first 5 months of the lawsuit just are addressing that. So there are times when, if two people make this about the same amount of money and a lot of times when they tell me their goals, I'll say, well, that's what Georgia law is already. They say, well, I want to make sure I keep what I have going into the marriage. But anything we earn during the marriage is, fair game and would be split. And I'm like, well, that's already what the law says.
That's how you title things, though.
Yes.
If you title it as joint, you got a problem.
Well, under Georgia law, if you just don't have a prenup, the law is with respect to assets, anything you have going into the marriage, so long as you can prove what it was, you need a bank statement or something from about the time that you got married. So that can be a reason to get a prenup, just to at least establish what the baseline was at the time of the marriage. But Georgia law is going into the marriage, what you owned before the marriage is your premarital property. Anything that money earned through market forces or whatever is still premarital because it's not through a marital effort. But any assets earned during the marriage are subject to equitable division, not necessarily equal division. Mm-hmm. It's totally different. So fair, that equitable just means fair. Judges can divide it however they want, which creates a little level of unpredictability in Georgia. We're not a 50-50 state, although most people think that. So, I mean, that's really what... now, when you if you take that premarital asset, let's say you have a house that you go into the marriage and it's in your name, and then you go put it in your spouse's name during the marriage, that creates a presumption that you've now gifted your premarital property to the marriage. So that's kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah.
So if you want to avoid those types of things, I still think it's wise to go see a lawyer and make sure you say, okay, this is what my goals are. And then I can evaluate, okay, I think you really can accomplish that without a prenup. I just would say, make sure you save all your statements from the month you got married to show what was in your investment accounts. A prenup would be better, but if it's going to be an awkward topic or if they're going to resist it and we can accomplish it and skin the cat a different way, every now and then that would be my recommendation. But
something I run to, we joked a minute ago about, it's 24, everything goes, right? But you have a situation where a woman, a client, owns a home and she's been dating a guy for a while and now he's going to move in, but he's going to start paying half the mortgage. And I've always advised against that. I'm like, no. You need to pay your own mortgage. Maybe he pays you can call it rent or something. Yeah. But that's commingling of an asset at that point. Well, because he's putting principal down on that asset. If it goes on for 3 years, they never get married, or they get married, then there's divorce later. It just, to me, it's not real clean.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. I
mean, all the assets separate,
Yeah, and even though he's not on the title and they're not married, there can be an equitable partitioning, what we call. Right. And he can make an equitable claim to some of that property interest if he was making payments towards the mortgage. Whether he'd be successful or not, it's a different story, but there's a legal claim to be made.
But there's a door that gets cracked open in that case.
Exactly.
Pay the utilities.
Yes, there you go.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Do the grocery bill.
Yeah.
Or get married and get a prenup for you.
Or exactly.
Go see Leslie.
Come see me.
Get the prenup.
A nice ironclad prenup.
Then go get married.
There you go.
Exactly. Or another case, we have where woman moves in with man, but she sold her house and she was going to take that money and she could just pay off his and they wouldn't have a mortgage together. And I'm just like, no.
I know. Anytime you're doing these huge financial transactions, check with a lawyer first, for sure.
Yeah, no. Let's not do that yet.
Let's pay off his house that's in his name alone. Yes. What a great idea.
Right. What could go wrong?
I know.
What could go wrong? Remember, the Golden Bachelor did not work out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they didn't make it past
shocked.
4 months or something.
What are we talking about?
The Bachelor.
Bachelor.
There used to be The Bachelor, the TV show, and now it's the Golden Bachelor.
Yeah. What is the Golden Bachelor?
He was like 70, and that marriage did not last. So I think
because he married a 30-year-old.
No, he married
it was
like
all
another 70-year-old,
55 and up.
kind of like it's his golden years.
Yes. There you go.
I don't watch much TV.
Okay, so they didn't want to say like gray-haired bachelor, so it was golden.
The old guy.
So I think they must have had a prenup.
Oh.
And so it was okay.
Paid for by the show.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Right.
But that's just kind of a warning thing that these things seem all great and wonderful one day, and then 5 months later, they're not.
That's the problem is, later in life you are, the more set in your ways you become, the more, chatter you have from kids and relatives. And so, those marriages, there's more challenges involved in some of those.
Blending lives is hard when you're 70.
Exactly.
It's hard when you're
It's hard anytime.
30,
but when you've got more money involved, more people involved, it's just more hurdles.
A Golden Bachelor show. I'm still on that.
I know. I know.
Okay.
You'll have to Google
The Bachelor is never going away.
To watch TV. I don't understand.
We don't necessarily watch all the time.
Oh,
but we just know pop culture.
Know things that are happening.
Paying attention. Yeah.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad.
I'm
glad I have you guys.
It's not all business podcast. Yeah, I know.
I didn't know about the Golden Bachelor until just now.
That's true.
I am now caught up for
Well,
pop
The Bachelor's
culture.
been around for what, 25 years?
I remember that when I was in college.
Ooh, I know.
Yeah, that was.
It's not going anywhere.
Thing. No, no. Actually, when I was still flying, there was a guy at Atlantic Southeast Airlines where I flew. His name was Jake. And Jake was
Pavelka.
Yes. Jake,
Oh,
Jake was
yeah.
I'm a historian of The Bachelor.
Oh, yes.
Oh, he had
Let me
that.
put you in touch with Jake.
Oh yeah, he was, and they did the "On the Wings of Love." That song was the theme song of his year.
And
I
he
remember
picked that
Jake.
very volatile woman.
Vienna.
That's
You're
it.
welcome.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Wow, you're good, Leslie.
I did not watch any episodes, but I would hear all the flight attendants talking about it because it was all the rage, right?
Yeah.
And it was funny. I remember climbing in the seat at like 5:30 in the morning, getting ready for a flight, and the first officer was like, she was like all about Jake and The Bachelor and everything, and evidently there was an episode where he was standing on the side at this airport somewhere. And he's like, I could fly any plane out here, and she was all disgruntled because that's not how that works.
Yeah. Don't be a liar, Jake. Come on.
They all have wings and engines, right? That's a real thing, but you have to have it's called a type rating. You have to go to class to fly the airplane for several months. You just can't hop from a 7.4 to a
plane to that
7.5 or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, that whole show's made up. I know it is because we know he can't fly.
Yeah, and you're like, you know what? You cracked the code.
Yeah.
So
really? It's not all real?
I don't think it's that literal, but yes, she was all upset about that. She found a flaw.
Yeah, imagine that.
Prenups to The Bachelor.
I know. You know what? I feel like that's a natural segue.
Yes, it is a natural segue. Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for listening to today's episode. You get a pop culture bonus at the end there if you're we're out of tune just like me. If you're interested in learning more about Wiser Wealth Management, you can schedule a consultation, meet with one of our fiduciary financial advisors by going to wiserinvestor.com. You can go see Leslie at
Odell O'Neill, Hungerford and Blanchard.
Or just Google her name.
770-405-0164.
There you go. Or the phone number. We have a couple more episodes on marriage and money and conflict. Episode 183, Avoid Financial Conflict in Marriage. Episode 160, How Finances Affect Divorce. And obviously, we have this whole new YouTube audience now. We're getting a lot of YouTube views. So if you're sitting here watching on YouTube, if you're not, it's called A Wiser Retirement. What is a certified divorce financial analyst? We talked about that at the very beginning with you and Shauna. Can joint bank accounts prevent marital conflict? I have, that's a whole nother episode we should bring Leslie in on.
Gotta unpack
as the other side of the conversation.
Show, experts say joint accounts promote marital harmony.
I have this thing where I do. People sit down. They'll say, "Oh, we have separate accounts." I say, "Oh, okay. Well, how long have you guys been married?" "Oh, 20 years. I'm like, "So when's your money gonna get married?" But some people take it well and some people don't. That's the best thing about being successful, right? I can just be me.
No if you filter. Offend that person, you know what? Another client will walk in the door.
Exactly. If I see a process and this is how it works and this is how this marriage is wired, then it's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
But the problem is usually it's creating conflict. And so I'm trying to resolve the conflict.
Distrust and paranoia. Yes. When other wheels start to, clunk around or whatever, then all of a sudden, okay, well, I wonder what he's been, and now I don't trust him because of that. Now should I be worried about the money?
Right. Usually
it works well until it doesn't.
Exactly.
And then,
I'm usually in the camp of like, well, I just can't go buy whatever I want. Well, I'm like, well, that's the problem because you're not saving enough for retirement.
Yeah. Right.
So yes, you need checks and balances. You need someone to tell you no.
Accountability.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's always like
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, how can you expect to be succeeding here if you're not on this journey together? That's usually my angle with that. We do have a blog we've linked to how to differentiate between marital and non-marital assets. And then we've linked directly to Leslie's website as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys again later.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.